So, finally to the panel debate, and it's a great pleasure to be able to introduce such an illustrious group of gentlemen. I say gentlemen because that's what all six clearly are, and despite hoping that some organisations we asked would be represented by a female, none were forthcoming. So maybe that's another challenge for brass bands in general in the future, and BBE will certainly be pushing this equality and diversity agenda. In fact, we will be staging an event hopefully early next year on this regard. So, the panel. We're delighted and honoured to be joined by Ulf Rosenberg, who's flown in today from Stavanger in Norway, as well as leading the organisation that presents the most prestigious international band contest, the European Championships. And my computer has just frozen. Ulf is also a driving force behind the Sidis Entertainment Contest, held in Stavanger every November. Ulf is a fine trombone player. But despite this, he still became the president of the European Brass Band Association in 2007 and has continued to play a vital role in Norway's ascension in recent years to the pinnacle of the European brass band community. Martin Mortimer comes from a very famous brass band family, probably the most famous in fact, and is organiser of the British Open Championship, the oldest and most venerable brass band contest and indeed one of the oldest music competitions in the world. Martin's professional career is in property, but maintaining the status and continuing relevance of the British Open has remained a lifetime passion, and his success in achieving this is demonstrated in the speed one must get off the mark to secure a ticket for this hugely popular event. Andy Straiton is a lifelong brass player brought up in Yorkshire, where he played with Ellen Silver Youth Band, amongst others. Andy is chair of the UniBrass Foundation and is currently studying for a PhD in chemistry. But despite this, he has never been able to master valves, and his brass playing has been limited to playing the trombone. David Ashworth's life in bands has seen him play tenor horn and tuba, as well as mixing the conducting of a number of successful lower section bands with a career in the police force. David is also a prominent member of the Association of Brass Band Adjudicators Executive Committee and is heavily involved in the organisation's training initiatives for new members. Martin Gernon has enjoyed a long and varied career in business, and over the past decade has been prominent at brass band trade exhibitions through his uniform and percussion companies, where he has built upon his vast experience as a percussionist. In early 2018, Martin was involved in setting up BrassPass TV, which has expanded to live streaming brass band events from across the globe. And this year, that expansion saw the establishment of the BrassPass Band of the Year contest. And at the end of the row, we have James Garlick, who completes our trio of trombonists on the panel. Or is that a frolic? No? I was up all night working on that one. James is the current conductor of Borshurst Band and enjoys a very successful playing career, having performed with the Halley Orchestra, the BBC Philharmonic and Opera North, as well as leading bands like Brighouse and Rastrick. Since arriving at Borshurst in 2014, James has contributed greatly to the band's rise to prominence, much of which is through its Sunday evening brass band club concerts, which are live streamed on Facebook, like we are right now. We will focus on the panel to begin with, but for those in the room and online, we will have a chance to ask questions and make points. If you raise your hand in the room, either Rosie or Sarah, who will be equipped with a microphone, will find you. So please identify yourself and your organisation before making your point, if you have an organisation. If you're watching online, please use the hashtag BetterBanding while asking a question on Twitter, and Parky, who we have at the end of the row here, will be monitoring these so that those of us here in the hall can find out the mood of the banding world. Please keep all comments respectful, and remember that we are much more interested in positive solutions than finding out why you were robbed at the last area contest. So, what is the purpose of brass band contesting? Ulf Rosenberg.
The Saturday in the European is probably one of the most attractive events to play in. I was standing behind the stage and looking at the band who was about to go on stage. And in the middle of the band, there was a young lady crying, carrying her second horn. And told me that she was giving up time that she didn't have. Her little child was with her sick mother that weekend. She was spending money that she didn't have, away from the family, taking off work to play the gig of her life. As a president of an organization and responsible for such an event, you have a lot of stakeholders to look after, to think about, to care for. You have the jury members, distinguished jury panel, world-famous musicians. You have VIPs coming in from all over Europe. You have the local VIPs, the Lord Mayor will turn up, the local president of the regional parliament, the cultural director of the city. You have band chairmen. You have the best conductors in the world. Fantastic composers delivered wonderful music. All kind of stakeholders who needs attention to be looked after. But we should never forget why we do this. And it is for the single player who's giving up time, giving up money, spending time, spending months on preparing to play the gig of their life. And for me, that was a kind of a reality check. I've been to the European as a player, as a tourist, as a journalist, as a band chairman, as a representing Norway as a delegate, and responsible for the whole thing. And I think it's very important to never forget about the players who are there to play the gig of their life. And why do we do this in the big picture? Because you can, of course, single focus on the players. I think the European event, as we have seen it in Norway, we have been hosting the European 5 times. The Europeans have served as a locomotive, pulling the movement forward, as a flagship to be proud of, and made the Norwegian banding going through a kind of a quality wonder that would never happen without international relations. Moving the Norwegian brass band movement, because the Norwegian Federation consists of wind bands and brass bands, but we're now talking about the brass bands, to be kind of a local village phenomenon. The first band turning up in the European in Royal Albert Hall back in the 70s came spectacularly last. And then there was the question, oh, where do we go from here? Are we really going to compete with these people? Or was this just a nice journey and we had great fun in the bar after, and London is a nice city and Royal Albert Hall is spectacular, so this was it? And they decided, obviously, as we know, that no, we need to really go back. And decided to make North Sea not the barrier between west coast of Norway and the UK, but as the old Vikings did, as a transport corridor. But the other way, bringing British conductors, jury members, inspiration to Norway, bringing up the movement, educating people, educating players. So the competition is kind of try to reach the level of the best ones. And we see the same has happened in Switzerland, who now had the European champion twice. We've seen it in Belgium, with Bandsman Willebroek as the most prominent example, winning several times the European. Netherlands being a very important country in the family. And the French band, let's take one country, has just been moving from the challenge, formerly B section, to the championship section. The French band previously filling the bar, now filling the hall, because it's a band not to miss, the French band. So this is kind of spreading the word. It's a missionary thing, and it's a competitive thing that is bringing the quality spiral going the right direction. And that's the drive for me. The combination of the single player and this big idea of helping this quality spiral to move the right way.
Martin?
Thank you. To start with, a tough act to follow because you're a very eloquent speaker and obviously you've said lots of very relevant things. I think I agree with just about everything you've said. I think that we all run contests for the players, and I think in Britain it's very much part of the tradition of brass banding. It's been there since the 1800s, and it's an opportunity for local people or local bands, regional, national, and international, to show, to try and raise the bar, to have them, give them an opportunity to challenge and see how they compare with the bands that are in their area and hopefully move upwards. I think that in terms of the sort of the social thing in our country, bands are very much community-based, as they are indeed in your country. And I think it's really important that contesting remains in not to say we shouldn't look at ways of improving, I think we should, but the structure is very much part of our tradition in banding. And I think that giving young people the chance to develop the skills, raise the bar, sit alongside fantastic musicians is something that contests enable them to do. And as you said, the social aspects of it, it's a great opportunity. A good contest gives a lot of people, old friends, to have a really good day, listen to music. So it's a very sociable event as well as developing the musical skills. And that's very much part of, I think, banding and what it's about. I think that in terms of the structure of these things, that's obviously something there'll be quite a discussion about during the course of today. I think that, however, the big contests give the top bands the opportunity to both compete against themselves, but also a platform, and it gives the audiences who want to watch them that opportunity to go and see the bands and how that excitement, how they deal with a piece that is going to be a challenging piece of music for them to address. But just sort of to round that off, I think you've said entirely the right thing. It is about the players. It's about the quality of what we have to ensure that we're going to do. With contests today, we have to provide the right quality of entertainment. Someone has to come to the contest and feel that they've had a good day. They've enjoyed the music. It's been well organised from the top to the bottom, with the adjudicators, the players, the venue, and the people that actually run the contest, which is fundamental. So if you're going to do it properly. But it certainly has a purpose for me in the brass bands, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, Ulf and Martin obviously involved with contests at the very highest level. Andy, you come from a slightly different standpoint as chairman of UniBrass.
Yeah, so I think I do come at it from a very different perspective, and at UniBrass we probably have one of the broadest ranges of general abilities, from students at the likes of the RNCM and Birmingham Conservatoire who are phenomenally talented professional musicians, to the sort of bands that I've played in where very few of us are going to go make careers out of music. The vast majority of us study other subjects. I studied chemistry, for example. But I do broadly agree with what Ulf and Martin have said so far. It is about that continually improving standards. You push yourself to achieve better. I know, certainly coming from York, there was always that rival. We wanted to beat Lancaster, that was our rival university. And it does push you on to achieve those higher standards and perform at a higher level. And again, it's about the players. Like, a lot of people, the vast majority of people in this room probably are not paid to do this. We're not paid to give up our Saturdays to go and wait for the draw sort of thing. And so you do have to enjoy it. You have to enjoy doing it. And that comes out of the playing as well, but also out of just enjoying the day as a whole. You want it to be something that it is a good thing to spend your time doing. You do build like the community within the band. We talk a lot about being community-focused bands, but you spend a lot of time with these people. You spend a lot of time in rehearsals. It's probably about the end of February, early March time. We all consider what the point of contesting is as we're into the fourth week of area test piece preparations. But you have to get something back from it as a player. But I think the other thing that we have to consider is, as an audience, what do the audience want from this? What do they get from this? What do they get from listening to the same band, different bands playing the same piece 18 times? And clearly Martin has proved that that sells tickets. But I think it's something that we need to consider at all levels of bands, is how do we do that? How do we make that enjoyable? And then when we look at maybe the lower section contests, university contests, we can see that there's the local area contests with your test piece contest. They've got maybe 3 or 4 bands in a section. And then I know recently there's Bolsover and Wychern contests are both full. They've both closed early. Because there's so many bands wanting to go. They will go. I've played at those before and had great audiences, far more than I've ever had at kind of the Dolphin Centre in Darlington sort of thing. And it's, what is the point of contesting? Are we looking at things that are already there? Is that what people are enjoying? So I think it's that needs to be considered. And we are amateur musicians. Do we enjoy doing what we're doing?
David, you've got a fantastic experience as a player and a conductor, but maybe you have an adjudicator's perspective on this question as well.
Yeah, the question itself, what's the purpose of brass band contests? It's something that really concerned me during the early hours of this morning at 3:30 when I'm sat in my lounge thinking, what is the question? What is the answer? And I've written some notes. So I'm going to just read to you what I actually think at this point to the question. The purpose of the brass band contest is to continue a rich heritage of tradition. That's the most important thing as far as I'm concerned. And to develop and encourage all participants to press for a higher standard of performance. And this includes players, conductors, and composers. To provide the opportunity for players to improve their technical ability in all sections as a result of the technical demands set by the test pieces, and to provide an opportunity for new composers to write new music. And then I thought, well, yeah, that's good, because that's what I think it should be. But what I've put here is, however, each of the above points could be counter-argued by those who don't value the purpose of contesting by arguing that these points can be achieved without contesting. So really, I don't know where we are with this one. I really don't know where we are.
I do like an honest man. Martin Gernon, completely different approach. But
Yeah.
maybe the same answer.
No, it's not going to be the same answer. 99.99% of musicians in the brass sector are amateur. We don't do it for a living. We don't do it as a profession. But the one thing which unites us with professionals, I think, is our will to improve and our willingness to improve. We want to play the best we can. We want to push ourselves, we want to challenge ourselves. And the brass band contest gives us that platform to do that. We want to have it as a fun situation, as a social situation, but I think the vast majority of players around the country and around the world want to test themselves. And they want to be the very best they can. They want to benchmark themselves against their competitors, either locally or nationally or internationally. And they want to improve. And by improving the standard of playing, by improving the cohesive nature of their bands, it improves the experience they get overall, whether that's contesting, whether it's social, whether it's platform, whether it is concert. Okay? So the purpose of the brass band contest, I think, is to improve us as players and to make us strive further to improve the standard, but above all, we should be enjoying it.
James?
So you've probably noticed the answers have got shorter and shorter as it's gone down the line. So I'm left with the difficult job of to either agree or disagree. Well, of course, the question is, what's the purpose? Well, I'm going to speak as me, I've only ever conducted 2 brass bands, a Stopcross Youth Band and Borzhurst Band. So I'm going to go on my experiences, what I've had from contests and what I think we've got out of it. Well, Two things. One, of course, you want to go and win. Purpose is, why do you want to go? You want to go and win and compare yourselves against your other bands in your section. It's the whole point of going, otherwise you wouldn't go. You could easily get that piece and rehearse that in your band room and go and perform at a concert. It wouldn't have the same effect, would it? So, of course, Bozos have done it where we've gone from the third, second, first, and et cetera, doing that by spending quality time, looking at finer details of music, looking at how we get the best out of players. That may be involving more practice, more band time together, more ensemble time together. But certainly the ultimate is that you want to perform that piece to the best of your ability, no matter what section you're in and where you are. I think the difference in the question can be split into two bits as well. When we get to the European level, you're a flagship, aren't you? You're representing the very, very best of brass bands. So therefore, yes, you're competing against those very brass bands, but there's no structure for you to work through anymore. You're up there and you're doing it there with the players that you have and the competitions that you're lucky enough to get to represent. Whereas when you come back down to the fourth section, we're doing it to be able to progress, aren't we? To come through those and to move from fourth, second, third and upwards and so on. So I think the question is difficult, isn't it? To me, it's very simple in that we want to enter, we want to improve, we want to play the best we possibly can and win. And then like you mentioned earlier, that you compare yourselves then up against who your local bands are, wider community and further afield. So for me, that's the bottom line there. But I do think there's a difference in terms of being that flagship competition and have the very, very best being on that stage in the very, very best venues, the very best music performed for you and in the lower sections there and the purpose of those. I see that very differently.
So quite a lot of agreement there, and even though there were some wide-ranging answers, no doubt dependent on viewpoint, but is there anybody in the hall who has got a contrary view to any of these, or something to add to that we've not considered? Gordon, if you just wait for the microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
This, right? There are a number of things. I once played with a band, a good band, and they didn't ever want to win the area, and that was CWS Manchester, because if they won, then there'd be mass bands in London. They didn't want the mass bands, so they'd rather get second than first. On the other hand, I've been involved with Douglas Band for 25 years or something, and for them, it's not about winning. It's not about comparing themselves. It's nice if they can compare themselves, but for them, it's getting bums on seats for rehearsals, because being a small island, the shorter players anyway, and there are many other things that attract them away from bands. And the only thing that drags them back to band practice is if they're going in for a contest. So that puts bums on seats, which does a world of good for the conductor. And then when they do go away, they have an absolute beano over time, and rehearsals continue like that for quite a while. And when I say they have a good time when they go away at Blackpool, you can't have rehearsal on Saturday afternoon because they're all on Pleasure Beach. Not allowed, because that's part of their holidays as well. And if you realise that it costs them, on average, 80 quid each to attend the area, because on the island, you can't get there and back in a day very easily because you don't know what you're going to draw, so you've got to be there at least one night. If the section starts late, it's 2 nights, and they pay that themselves. And if you've got 3 kids in a band, that's some money they've got to lash out. So that's their holiday, and your conductor has got to respect that. So the main thing for them is bums on seats, which continue to get, well, we sounded good, didn't we, when we all got together? And they've forgotten how good they could be. And that's the thing, and it keeps them going for a while, and then it tapers off until they get another one on the Guild, another contest on the Isle of Man. The only sad part is they can't go to more contests on the mainland because of the cost. Yeah. That's the only thing, but it does get bums on seats, and that's very important. And one thing that I would, probably in a later session, I don't know, but what worries me is sometimes the subject of the test pieces themselves, because these kids are going and they're doing their very best, and I think it's very important to make sure that the pieces they can play are within the reach. I looked at the third section thing. By God, they're going to test them. There's so much tightrope walking. I've seen kids going on stage crying because they've not been able to play the part. And they've come off in tears because they didn't play the part, because it was against them, but they had to go because the camaraderie in the band made them do. So I think it's got to be realistic, and the promoters can do an awful lot by making sure the pieces are accessible to those bands. But that's the main reason. They get bums on seats, and it does the band a hell of a lot of good, irrespective of results.
Thank you. Any other views? Gentleman at the back, Richard.
I'm Richard Milton. I'm the chairman of the Northwest Area Brass Band Association, but I'm also regional secretary of the Northwest Regional Brass Band Committee. It's all very complicated. Basically, I run the Northwest Area contest. I took over from Peter Bates last year. My question really is, we've obviously got representation from the Europeans and the Open, and then colleagues from elsewhere. Probably the most important contest for bands in the year is their particular regional contest, which, contrary to popular belief, aren't run by Capital. They are supported by Capital, and Capital actually then run the nationals. My question is, really, were Capital invited to this event? And if not, why not? And and if they were, was there any response? Because obviously, that is the most important contest for most bands at the sort of grassroots level. So it's just a question, really.
Yeah,
to see
I can answer that. I can answer that. They were actually invited, and I did get a short statement from Philip Morris just this week, actually. The national has its own infrastructure, which involves elected regional secretaries attending the regional forum hosted by Capital Promotions, at which any issues about the national championships are raised and dealt with. So that's the official stance from Capital. And answer to your question, Richard.
Yeah, well, that's a statement that's made me think. Is this still going out live on Facebook?
You like thinkers.
But I do want to stress that it is about, for all the bands here that attend Blackpool, it's not a Capital event, it's a Northwest Regional Brass Band Committee. We're an autonomous organisation that's supported by Capital financially, but not, the people will remember what happened a few years ago, and obviously, there were things that took place. But a lot of the test piece choices and things like that, and Professor Gregson talked about the 20 bands playing the same piece might not be relevant anymore. Obviously, that all stems from that particular contest. Can I carry on?
Briefly.
I've got a couple of questions of members of the panel that came out of this morning's presentation by Professor Gregson. The first one is on closed adjudication. I know when, not through personal experience, I hasten to add, because I too am a trombone player, used to be. B flat bass now, second B flat bass. But I know from talking to colleagues who've done professional auditions, is quite a lot of times they're blind auditions. When somebody's auditioning for a position in orchestras, so it does happen in the classical world. But my real question is to David: what do judges think about closed adjudication? Because quite often, especially in the local contests that we run, you can be the audience can be right on top of you, and actually having that barrier between you and the audience could be. I'm not saying it, I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with closed adjudication. I just wondered what ABBA's reaction to that is.
Well, ABBA's point of view is that closed adjudication remains. I think there's an awful lot of lack of trust, and I'm one of those people that will say what I feel, and I think an awful lot of people have this lack of trust for adjudicators by turning around and saying, well, who's playing, which is nonsense really now. When you're actually sat there in a box, you are concentrating totally on a score that's in front of you. You can't see anything to have any distraction. And I think that's the main point. Open adjudication, I've done open adjudication when we had the minors at Blackpool. Open adjudication is all right, there's no problem with it. It's just you get distracted. People next to you start talking to you, and you can't have anything like that. And I think it's right that we, at this present moment, are in boxes until the general public have a different view of adjudicators. And trust is the biggest word of the lot.
Yeah. I think a more general point that has always been in my mind is if brass band contests stopped tomorrow everywhere, what would be the effect on brass bands in general, and would the general public ever notice? Does anybody actually take notice of what we do? James?
Yeah, just to pick on the gentleman's point there about contesting the purpose. I mean, if you're basing your band around having a contest and having bums on seats for a contest, and you in reality enter 4 competitions a year, to me that's completely the wrong model. You know, so I appreciate what you said, it brings people in, but then when we say that it tapers back off again, then to me that's not actually solving or helping anything, is it? So, in terms of what we're saying there about getting what is the point of a contest? Well, actually, if you wanted to quantify that and put numbers, well, surely it should be 30% contest, 70% concerts, and generating your engagement through players and enjoyment and the link with your community and your audiences. You've got to think of it like that as well. So I'm not quite sure that works in that you bring players in, pay players in, and do that. And also then, actually, is it then a real version of how good your band is, you know, especially if we're bringing 5, 6, 7 players, and then rightly so, then maybe we should be encouraging the younger players to fill those seats. And yes, they may not be at that standard at that moment in time, but then the band would not get the results that they should get, or maybe, you know, they shouldn't get if that's the standard they are. But then what happens is we get a realization of where they actually are within the sections, and then they can build again from there. I just think maybe we need to, if we're looking at the point of contesting, it's about players being on seats all the time, not just necessarily for contests.
Yeah, Ulf, I mean, I think you might have a different view in terms of the region and European experience on that one.
If we decided tomorrow to stop the European, somebody else would have started the European the day after. If there was a national ban of brass band contesting, you immediately would have seen an illegal movement running undercover, underground brass band contest, because it's a part of our DNA to contest in banding. And it's so integrated to the development of the repertoire on all levels. I spent 10 years with my 2 boys playing in their school band, running that school band, and they have been contesting in the regional contest, in the national contest, as a nice, good 2nd, 3rd division school band. So I've been involved in all different aspects of this for many years, and it's an integrated part of how we develop banding, not for the purpose just of contesting, but it has a purpose in itself because it's a social family gathering for the movement. But it's a part of developing the repertoire, developing the players, benchmarking you against your neighbor, your arch rivals. It's extremely important to our movement.
Martin, you've played your role recently in starting up a new contest, so obviously the thought of banning them would be quite far from your mind.
Yes. Yeah, totally far from my mind. The original question was, if we stopped the contest tomorrow, would the general public know, or would it have any effect? I don't think it would, because the vast majority of contests are for brass banders and brass band enthusiasts. We play traditional repertoire on the whole. We don't look to attract a wider audience into the fantastic music that now comes through. We forget at times that the competition for the social time and the interest of the general public is at a greater level than it has ever been. And whether we like it or not, we are in show business. Okay? When we go to a stage to perform, we are in show business. If we do not have the ability to entertain an audience or to attract an audience, then if contesting finished tomorrow, the only people who would mourn it is our own brass band family. And the vast majority of the general public, even if it was put into national newspapers, would say, so what?
I think one of the things I remember most over the last few years was when Ikanger won the European Championships a few years ago, and there was a YouTube video of their plane arriving back in Bergen after they'd won the title, and it was almost like the football team returning with the European Cup. The welcome they got, there was a huge crowd at the airport, and you know they were really it was really a matter of national pride. to the Norwegians, that their band, and band, I mean, other bands in the area came out and welcomed them by playing in the airport. I'm just trying to picture that happening in Leeds Bradford International. It's one of these things that you know, that the supportive nature of that culture seems to be a bit different from what we know. Parky, I do believe we have some questions that have come in, or some comments from the rest of the world.
Yep, so we've got about 60 people watching online at the moment, so they're hanging on every word. We've had a couple of interesting questions, but I'll just summarise a couple of the subject areas that have been hot topics of discussion today. We've had lots of congratulations for Edward Gregson this morning, and a lot of support for some of what was being said there. And a lot of people interested in this discussion around closed versus open adjudication, and whether the format of the contest, whether it's a set test or an entertainment contest, makes a difference in that. But we've had a couple of really interesting questions. One from Jill Rogers, who says she hasn't been watching all day, but she's with us at the moment, and saying that why are promotions, demotions decided on only one contest a year, which I think we'll probably come back to when we talk about the structure. But one that might be really relevant at the moment is from Tabby Kerwin, who I think has been talking a lot about mental health in banding at the moment. And she says, with statistics showing that musicians are 3 times more likely to suffer from mental health issues than the general public, is it time that contest promoters, as well as the bands themselves, put an emphasis on supporting the mental health of musicians? And has anyone got any ideas about how we might do that?
Okay. Some excellent comments there. What about the role of the adjudicator? Who judges the judges, and are contest organisers who actually choose them? And very often the music, the most powerful people in banding in terms of determining our artistic future. Who wants to go first, Martin?
Were you asking me, telling me? I think that it's a fair point about adjudicators, and I think that what we try to do, and I'm sure all the contest organisers try to do, we try to get the most experienced adjudicators that we can for the individual contests, whether it be at the Open or our contest in Blackpool. And I think also the experience of that adjudicator with the music that is being, played, I think is very important. I think it's obviously important that we recognise the role that your body plays, and that we ensure that the right people are in the box. That's very, very important. But choosing those people is not always very easy, because everyone's busy, and it does sometimes come down to the availability of the adjudicators that can come on a certain day. You try and choose the best adjudicators that you can, because I think that sets the tone also for the quality of the contest. If you're playing and you're rehearsing, as you said, for many hours and many weeks, you would like to know that the person that's sitting in the box there is very well qualified to form a judgment as to who has performed the best. So you'd have to try and raise the bar as high as you can. Simple as that.
Yeah. Ulf, you've got obviously a different type of contest, and that is much more international. Does that become a factor when you're choosing the judges?
Clearly, yes. We try to balance this very well. However, it's outside my mandate to pick the jury members. That's done with our music commission. The EBBA General Meeting has an elected music commission consisting of Paul Hindmarsh from England as the chairman, Frode Rydland, former soprano player with Eikanger. He's probably the single person who played the most Europeans. And the composer Oliver Westby from Switzerland. They formed the EBBA Music Commission and are selecting the jury panel. And I say jury panel because it's important to have a balanced panel with people from different traditions, different brass band traditions in Europe, but also from the wider orchestral musical life. It was fashion for a while for some contests to pick people who have no clue about brass bands, like the principal violinist from the National Orchestra, etc. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, but it should be balanced, so we really have a panel of top class musicians, but where the majority are really knowing the repertoire, knowing the brass band media, knowing the format, knowing the tradition. The heritage was mentioned, that's very important. So to balance that correctly out is extremely important, and that is the mandate we give to our music commission. I'm also involved with the entertainment contest Cities Brass in Norway, which is the equivalent to Brass in Concert you have here, but several times bigger, as we do 5 sections, 55 bands, something like that. We also have a panel who select the jury members. Yeah.
David, you represent the Association of Brass Band Adjudicators, and the question is, who judges the judges? Is there any specific setup within your organisation to monitor the performance of judges?
Well, yes. Every adjudicator is monitored by the people who select them to adjudicate the contests. There is normally a report that follows into our organisation to say what level of correctness they put into things. There is, it's not just the written adjudication, it's how you actually act, the courtesy that you show, and everything that goes with it. It's not just, our job is not just to be an adjudicator. Our job is also being a face of the judges, and that's a difficult side. You know, you've got to be able to stand on a stage and speak. You can't be an adjudicator if you can't stand on a stage and say, ladies and gentlemen, this is where you went wrong. You know? So we don't actually turn around and say, you're a good adjudicator, you're not. That's not our job. We provide adjudicators. Our association trains adjudicators. Everyone has to reach a specific standard. There is no set, you're a first section, you're a championship, you're a fourth section. There's none of that. Everyone stands at the same level. It's the reports that come through that actually put everybody into a frame, if you understand my meaning.
I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do, and for everybody to remain balanced about it, but would you ever imagine a situation where you could have bands giving feedback in a formal sense about what how the adjudicators have performed?
Oh dear. Can I just say something, please? And I'll look at the television camera and say, this is me speaking. It's my opinion. It's nothing to do with ABBA. If I was allowed to say what I'd like to say, I would say every single band person should be able to put in what your comments are about me as an adjudicator. If I've adjudicated for you, I'd like to know what you think. And I think that that's what we should be doing. I think you guys should be able to write a report and say, he's not up to standard as far as I'm concerned, and let us, on the other end of it, look at the organisation of it. Because there is a disciplinary side, there is a retraining side, and it can all be used, but it's never done because it's always, don't mention that.
Very refreshing.
Sorry.
No, we've all been, sorry, Val. Yeah, sorry, can we just have a quick microphone?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Val Trim, Woodhaven Festival of Brass. I've had a lot of experience with choosing adjudicators over the years and working with them, and parts of my team working with them. And I have to say, they're all different. I think we already know that. And they all have very different standards about how they behave sometimes and how they report on what they've seen. And, you know, obviously, adjudicators have a right to be entirely subjective in their responses. But I wish, this is an appeal really, that there was some kind of coordination about how they express their ideas and adhere to what we as contest organisers actually want from them in terms of being able to have a level playing field for all the bands across the different sections. So in other words, how you report in one section should be similar to how you report in another. And that's something that in my communications with adjudicators, I try to do. I give some guidance about how I would like them to report. I'm not commenting about what they should report, but how it's expressed to bands, so that bands get positive as well as negative feedback. I have had adjudicators in the past who've been so negative, I've not wanted to give the adjudications back to bands who have spent many weeks and hours rehearsing stuff only to get something which is totally negative. I'm very conscious of that. The other thing is, somebody mentioned about always having the most excellent of adjudicators. And most experienced. And whilst I think that's an aspiration that works very, very well at perhaps elite banding, for those of us who work in that sort of lower level stuff, we like to give opportunities not just to our bands to have good adjudication, but we like our adjudicators to develop along with us. And we've got an association now with ABBA where we take some of their trainees to work as assistants. And this year, we're using one of the assistants that we had last year as an adjudicator. So we like to see ourselves as an organisation that helps to develop the adjudication process. So I don't think it's necessarily the case that you need to have fully experienced people working with you at the level that we operate at. But we do have to have talented individuals, which is rather a different thing. And of course, over the last 5 or 6 years, I've always tried to ensure that we have at least one woman on the panel somewhere. And I think that's very important. And I also like to have somebody who's under 30. And it's very difficult. It's actually very, very difficult to get people who are young, under 30, experienced, capable, and free to do it. Because a lot of the people who can do this work are, at the present time, engaged in elite bands, and they're in Japan or somewhere, at the time that we do our competition. But I think this is a work in progress. We have to, organisers and people like ABBA and the rest of you who organise competitions and who provide elite players who eventually end up being adjudicators. This is something we need to collaborate on because it's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, just take one last question. We'll take Gordon and then we'll come back to you, Alan. Which makes no logical sense given that Rose is going to have to go away over there and then back again.
Yeah, regarding the other, or AOBB as it is now, I was a founding member many years ago, and I was mentored by Roy Newsom before I was let loose on the Grand Shield, etc., etc. But saying that, the way that ABBA works, I'll explain it a little bit more than what David did. But people who apply, first of all, their CV, whatever they provide with it, is sort of scrutinised. And then eventually, assuming it passes that stage, they say, okay, let's then try to get them as experienced as we can by sitting with somebody else who is very experienced. In fact, I was one of the mentors for David. And what we do there, David was sat with me, and he adjudicated the same performance as I did. We both made our notes, and then you compare your notes with what did he find that note out of tune? Did he do this and the other? And if he did he explain it in the notes? And were the notes legible or not legible? And what would we say if they were? And how we would present it. So we go through that, and then we put a recommendation in, and it's considered, and we say, well, okay, it needs another one. And I think you had 3 on yours, David Osfield, Jim Scott, and me, I think. So it's pretty intense. Yeah. And if all people of that level, various levels, say, yeah, this he's good, he does a good job, but let's not let him loose on the top section yet. Let him on a lower section, because he picks the right things out, he knows how to put it down and knows how to express it. And then he is monitored in that way. Once he's got the experience, then he can move up another section or whatever it might be. And it is pretty tough, and it's not easy to get onto the panel, to be honest.
Okay. Just quickly before we go back to Alan. mean, it's obviously very important that we get the top people involved in adjudication, but it's not always true that you can be a good player and a good adjudicator. The two aren't always true, are they? So, yeah. Yeah. Alan?
Hi, my name's Alan Widdop, also a trombone player. And a member of ABBA. I do think at the lower level of adjudicating, you've got to have a lot of sympathy with the standard of players. You can't expect to adjudicate a fourth section contest and adjudicate it at the same level towards the players as what you would do with a championship section band. You've got to take into account what level these players are at. Just because they're in the fourth section doesn't mean to say they're going to be a rubbish player, but we are presuming that they might be the ones that have come back down the ladder from championship playing, so the standard is slipping a bit. You're not as good as you used to be, or it's young ones that are starting off who struggle at playing a lot of things. So when you're listening to these pieces, you've got to take that into account, how far these people can go with it. In other words, it might not be perfect, but they're trying their damned hardest to get it perfect. So you've got to adjudicate it to what level you think, is this the best they can get it to, at the lower section of banding. And this comes into, I have another part of this as well, which we go back to contesting. The purpose of contesting, everybody loves contesting. It creates a family and it's a day out and things. But I think what's destroying it, or lack of support, is the test pieces. How many of us have gone to contest and said, oh God, what an awful piece that is? Now, if that's an awful piece, will you pay £25 for a ticket and go and listen once to it and walk out? No, you won't. You won't go. So if you don't go to the contest loses money, you lose your money, there's no more contest. So it's got to come back to the pieces that you pick. They've got to be relatively enjoyable to listen to a piece, I think, that's understandable for your general public, because all the people that are listening are really a general public, wives, children, uncles, auntie, all the players are in the pub, which is fact. It's fact. So there's only one or two people go listening to bands that are players. So these pieces are important whether we like listening to them or not. And some of the modern pieces, as hard as they are, which they've got to be at the highest level for the highest bands, they've got to be difficult. And it's very hard to write a great piece to listen to that's very difficult. Because you've got to have all the black dots there, go as fast as you can, go as high as you can, go as low as you can, and who wants to sit there all day and listening to that, and you can't go home whistling it. Yep. So I think you've got to have a great piece of music to keep a contest going.
I'm talking about great music. I'll just take one last question on this from Eddie Gregson. Just over there, Rosie.
Thank you. Hello, Edward Gregson. I'm not a trombone player, never have been a trombone player. First thing I should say. I've got a couple of comments, if I may, very quickly, Kenny, and then it is going to end in a question for Martin and for Ulf, if I may. So, I knew I'd be in a small minority about urban adjudication, but just a couple of points about that, if I may. First of all, of course, you're quite right. Orchestral auditions now, and I say auditions, they're not competitions, they're auditions, are held behind screens. And the reason for that was because of gender and racial diversity. Because some orchestras, and the Berlin Philharmonic was a good example, just wouldn't have female players at one time. And Sabine Meyer, who was the clarinetist who Karajan brought in, had a very hard time and eventually left the Berlin Phil. And you now look at the Berlin Phil and the Vienna Phil, and they're full of women, quite right, because it's all about the best players. And actually some of the best players, folks, are women, not men. So I just wanted to say that, because when I come back to worldwide competitions, Cardiff Singer of the World, BBC Choir of the Year, the Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow, string quartet competitions, the recent Philip Jones ensemble competition at the RNCM, none of them are in boxes. They're all out in the open. My question, therefore, comes to Martin and to Ulf. And obviously, I have adjudicated all the major competitions during my time. And I personally don't have a problem at all about being in the open, because I take that quite naturally. For me, part of the performance is a visual thing. You should be engaged with watching the performers, watching the conductor, whatever. I think that's an important part of a performance. It's crazy to think that you're stuck in a box and you can't see anything that's going on. So, for example, earlier I was quite cynical about the fact that some conductors manipulate the score. So there's a very difficult passage on third cornets. The adjudicators don't really know that that's been given to the solo cornets. Is that fair? In the competitions in Norway, and Martin's latest one, in Norway, if I'm correct, or if we talked about this earlier, in the set test piece, they're enclosed and they're open for the own choice. Martin's recent competition, which he initiated, they're open. I want to ask him why. And my point about the parallel is this. I do not understand the rationale which says one group of adjudicators listening to one piece have to be closed. Another set of adjudicators listening to the same bands are in the open, listening to different pieces. Why is it they can be trusted so that not necessarily it's Corey or Ikanger that are going to win? They're simply listening to the best performances of the music. I do not understand the rationale which can separate those off. For me, that's a complete mystery. So I'd appreciate Ulf giving comments on that in terms of Norway and whether it works or not. And then please for Martin to say, well, why is it in the open? Thank you.
I was never a part of that decision in Norway to open or take away the jury box in the own choice pieces. However, I was the president of the organization, but this happened after I retired as president. However, it was positively received among many of the bands, but there are still bands that are against it and would like to change it. But there is not a big debate going on, and I think most players and band leaders and chairmen and conductors thinks that trying to change that back will be like trying to get the toothpaste into the tube, which is rather difficult once it's out. When I started in EBBA as president, we made a survey because a lot of people ask me, you're the new president, will you now open the box and take away the box? And we made a survey, and we asked for the last, I can't remember that exactly, but the last 6-7 years, all jury members, we asked all band managers in the competing bands who have been present in the competition over the last 5, 6, 7 years, I can't remember the number of years we went back, all the country delegates, who are the ones who represent the country into EBBA, all the conductors, and I think that was it. And interestingly enough, in all the categories, the juries, the conductors, the bands, and the EBBA member countries and board members, music commission members, in all those categories, there was a large majority who wanted to keep the box. We're talking about 70% plus minus. We presented that in the brass conference, and since then the discussion in the Europeans has been almost dead because everybody saw it was very clear, the opinion of all the most important stakeholders, including the bands. However, I'm happy to take this debate again and facilitate a new survey. Is that if that is a demand among the bands and the players and the delegates. So, but it's not high on the agenda for EBBA currently.
Martin?
To respond to Eddie's request as to why we chose to put our adjudicators in the open, and incidentally we'll carry on to keep them in the open as well. First of all, it comes down to a matter of trust. Okay, we go to great lengths in selecting our adjudicators, and without exception, we've already selected next year and the year after. They are professional people. They have the ability to judge professionally. They're not influenced by the colour of a jacket. They're not influenced by the sway of a conductor's backside. And they have the integrity to not be swayed by that. Also, I think it's important that whenever contest organisers are giving briefings to judges on how they want them to judge, we installed in our competition almost a fair play mechanism. So, as Eddie said, if there's a third cornet difficult passage, was it played on third cornet? Or did the principal put it in? And if there was a particularly quiet section, was it muted? Did the players turn their back on the audience? Now, when you're in a box, yes, you don't have the distractions, and I understand that argument perfectly, but you don't see the nuances of performance that modern day conductors have a set of tricks up their sleeve in order to influence adjudicators. And we wanted to remove that element from there. And so that combined with the trust and the ability of the adjudicators that we put in place, with the impartiality of the adjudicators and the professional nature of who they are, I am entirely comfortable and happy that our contest will continue with open adjudication.
Yeah. Just before we move on to the next question, and we're running a bit behind here, but I've had a comment in from somebody we probably all know fairly well, Frank Renton, who you can be sure will have a view on everything. On the subject of contesting, it is necessary to take away the bands like Corey and Black Dyke who do it for the kudos and because sponsors insist on it. For the vast majority of bands, especially down the sections, it is a pride thing, and it provides an opportunity to spend time with friends and rivals in other bands. So quite a lot of resonance with what's been said already. Big contests are business ventures organised for the owner's profit, so if bands want to be involved, they have to accept the rules of engagement. But I think it is wrong with that where contests make a vast profit. I'm quite sure what he's talking about there. Bands that provide the entertainment should pay for the privilege of performing. The vast majority of smaller competitions are organised for the bands, and they should be at the forefront of the thinking of everyone involved in terms of organisation. The choice of judges is critical, and I believe that ABBA, with its totally uncritical criteria in terms of membership, is a force for bad practice in contesting. Organisers should be urged to think outside the ABBA parameters, so Frank being as controversial as ever. But before we make any comments on that, I think it's important that we do move on to the next part of the question, which is the current structure of brass band contests fit for purpose? We'll start at the other end of the panel this time. So James, can you please...
Yeah, sorry, we didn't have much feedback from the panel in terms of, apart from the two people there about the contests and adjudication, open adjudication. I just want to pick up on what Edward said earlier on. Now, Edward, I was at college whilst you were the principal there on trombone. Now, but similarly with everybody in this room who's a brass player, hands up if you've done Associated Board exam or Trinity through your years of playing. Okay, so who adjudicated you whilst you were assessed on your ability? A violin player. Okay, so these people are professional people, and I just want to pick up on what Edward said earlier on. I am completely open to having open adjudication. If anything, I think the scrutiny and the trust will be built through that, even more so if they're sat there and you can look at their faces as they're writing that. You know, don't you? And I think that's even, I'm completely open to that. In terms of that word adjudicator, it has to be used because you're assessing something, but in terms of it, it's a musician, isn't it? I was assessed by an oboe player as a trombone player. I went on to play for the BBC. Does that mean if I'd been assessed by somebody else, it wouldn't have been as good? So I think we keep ourselves in a little bubble And I think really we need to open that bubble and explore new avenues and trial it. If we haven't trialed it, let's trial it and see where we go with that. Sorry, I'll move on now to this next question. But I do think we have to be a little bit more open-minded. Even hearing what we're saying today, we're trying to keep it in a bubble, and I don't understand why we do that. So, is it fit for purpose? In my view, no. I agree that we need to have a competition where there is a set amount of points that you earn and that grades you as to where you are. Otherwise, what happens is you have bands that could become contesting bands. They don't support the community. They don't go and engage with their community. And actually, like what was mentioned before, people don't go to listen to competitions. Bozos have been lucky enough to be at the national finals this year, and you could probably count, 40, 50 people in that audience. And if you can imagine first and third section bands and their supporters all there, and you have a maximum of 50 people watching. If we're not prepared to support ourselves, then unfortunately it is going to finish, isn't it? So I think we have to take a little bit of responsibility of that as well. I make a point of going to listen to all bands to support not only the competition, but the bands that are there. It also gives me a good idea of where I think we might be if I was that musician assessing me. But I think we've got to help ourselves a little bit and actually go and support the contest and listen to the bands ourselves before we move on there. The next bit of it is contesting in the sections that we have. Now, Bozos have just moved up. Sorry, I'm speaking as if it's just Bozos here, but it's not. I'm probably speaking for lots of bands in the lower sections. We've just come up to the champion section as of January, A Tale As Yet Untold. Now, in reality, I know this, band know this, we're not going to compete with Foden's band or Fairy's band, and as much as we might like to think we are, I think that there needs to be an elite section up there, that they keep themselves up there. That's the majority. If you could look back historically, you could find out what points they've got, who's been up there the longest, put them in an elite section, and then have a little bit of a rejig maybe of the sections there, which I feel there would make lower section banding feel a little bit more. They've got some opportunities there, and without having to go up against those same bands every year, knowing full well that it's unlikely that you're going to be anywhere up there. So for a band like Bozos, who's gone from winning lots and lots of prizes, having all that, the great feeling about that, suddenly then they go up there to winning zip, nothing, or not even with a shout or with an opportunity of that. So I think maybe we could have a look at that a little bit. I just think it needs to be rejigged a little bit so there's opportunities for all bands within there.
There used to be a high section many years ago.
Yeah.
Super league section.
Yeah, in the early 70s, yeah. 70 and 71 at the Albert Hall, yeah. Martin?
Is it fit for purpose? I think at a regional level, yes, it is. There's a lot of regional associations around our country, all of which are volunteers, I will add, who put in countless work and countless effort to support the banding community in their local areas, and that should carry on. So at a local level contests, yes, I do think it's fit for purpose for what it's representing. It was mentioned earlier that the biggest contest that most people will play in each year is the nationals, whether it's at a lower section or at championship section level. Here is where I don't think it's fit for purpose. First of all, we are the only major banding country whose national championships is not run by its national organisation. We are the only banding country that separates and segregates the championship section of the competition from the lower section of the competition, which does nothing to inspire, to motivate, and to help improve the lower section and the youth players around the country, which is what it should be there to do. We have a cost issue with the national championships. It's around, £250 now to enter a regional level, plus your coach, your travel, your music, your conductor, so about £1,500. You then get invited to the national finals and you have to pay again, which shouldn't happen, in my view. You then shell out another, on average, we have researched this with bands, about £4,500 to attend the lower section finals and play in front of an audience of 50 people. Now, in a cost versus reward versus fulfillment statement, that is way out of balance and out of kilter. if it was up to me, if it was my view, we would move the national finals away from London and, like the Open Golf, have it returned to the Albert Hall every 5 years. We would put the lower sections and the championship section together over the same weekend. Bands, people who are performing should get free entry into the halls to listen to the higher sections, to get inspired, to say, I want to be in Black Dyke, I want to be in Corey. Yeah. I would move it around the country. So in each of the 4 years, move it to a different region so that that region doesn't have the huge cost burden of having to go down to a Cheltenham or a London, or, you know, if you're from Scotland, you got a horrendous bill every year to do this. So at a lower section level, I don't think it's fit for purpose. At a championship section level, the expenditure now that is required to enter the British Open, the Nationals, Brass in Concert. If you do well at the Nationals and then you represent your country in the Europeans, then that is another huge cost. We worked out that for a band who's doing those 3 competitions and doing the Europeans will have an annual bill of around £40,000. That is a huge, huge chunk. And it's my view that that cost element is going to be a factor in the future that will deter bands from attending such contests. It will deter the appeal of such contests, and it will stifle creativity because the bands will be spending all year fundraising to attend these events instead of looking forward with an objective plan on how they are going to increase their performance, increase their profile, and become a better organisation. So is it fit for purpose? No.
Thanks, man. Just before we come to David, I think Parky's got an interesting response to James's comments there.
Well, it's sort of picking up and running with a theme where probably the thing that's being talked about most is all about the section structure, and it really comes down to about three separate elements. There's been quite a bit of discussions around how the first section was introduced a number of years ago, and is that doing what it was meant to do in being that stepping stone up to the championship section, or has it just become what the second section was before? And that the section structure is not working for lower section bands, with various different areas slowly but surely moving towards a fewer and fewer number of lower section bands taking part, and whether that really represents the number of people that are taking part in banding. And then the final thing is that whether the section structure represents the right kind of contesting mix. Should it include more than one contest a year, or should it include different kind of contest formats that go into a mix in the ranking tables? So I don't think there's a clear answer coming through, but there are those 3 elements coming through quite strongly in the discussions.
Okay, something to keep in mind as we move forward. I think, James, you just wanted to respond to that.
Just in terms of, is first section working? Well, if I put it to this, we've just played Endeavour at the national finals, which you would think, I know this is going to pieces, would be a stepping stone as to what the next piece would be at the area. If you go from Endeavour to A Tale As Yet Untold, is the first section doing its job? I don't think so. I think there's a layer in between that and the elite that I've mentioned. That's where that. So the first section isn't a stepping stone or that progression through to there, because there is worlds apart from the pieces that have been chose for Endeavour or Symphony of Marches last year to A Tale As Yet Untold. So no, the first section isn't working in terms of progression into what is now just the championship section.
Yeah. Okay.
Could I just quickly pick up on that? In Switzerland now, at the Swiss Nationals, they've introduced this halfway house between their traditional first section and the championship section. And the pieces they're now picking, like Eden and Blitz and challenging pieces, but there is that huge gap from first up to championship section, and I think that halfway house would be a great
which is what the
innovation.
first section was originally intended for
Yes.
back in 1992. Yeah, just moving on, David.
Right, thanks. Again, I'm going to say this is nothing to do with ABBA. This is me, okay? Because I can be controversial at times. Here we go. This is actually a very difficult question to answer, and by asking it implies that the current structure is not fit for purpose. I personally think that the major contests, the Spring Festival, the British Open, the area contests, the Nationals, plus entertainment contests, Brass in Concert, Wychavon and Bolsover, all of which are extremely well supported in terms of entrance and audience, are the only ones that are actually fit for purpose. Therefore, the answer could be that if we take the best parts of each of these contest organisers and put them together under one banner, we would have a contest structure that could be fit for purpose. However, having two different registration systems doesn't help the situation. Unfortunately, to me, it just creates chaos and a lack of trust. The choice of test pieces in some contests are not always fit for purpose, especially the lower sections. Recently, there have been occasions when the test pieces have been selected with a ridiculous amount of percussionists required. At some contests, even the venues leave a lot to be desired. There appears to be a complete lack of funding throughout the whole contesting field. For example, when the situation arrives when an area qualifying contest prize money doesn't even cover the cost of entry of the final competition that you have actually won the invitation to play at. Consideration should be given to a total reorganisation of sections. Some bands presently are totally out of the depth playing in higher sections due to the promotion and relegation structure being decided on the result of one contest per year, that being the area contest, which some bands can't even enter due to the circumstances beyond their control. And yet, as a result of not attending, they get penalised for not playing. It's a totally ridiculous state of affairs. There appears to be a total lack of effort to assist bands, especially in the lower sections, and also a lack of effort from the bands themselves to help. For example, lower section bands will not be given any assistance regarding shortage of players because they have listed the fact that they have 40 players in the registration. When asked about borrowed players to be allowed for area contests, we are told there are no shortage of players because the registration shows that bands have full complements. We all know that bands hold on to players and hope that they will play in next year's area. But it's time now to get rid of these players who, to be honest, will probably never play with you again. And let's put in front of the powers that be that there is actually a desperate shortage of players in the lower sections. A rule of change regarding borrowed players would assist the band to keep bands alive from struggling like they do. We as judges penalise a performance due to missing parts, especially percussion, or because parts have been blatantly swapped onto other instruments due to shortage of players and abilities. One must remember that we can only judge on what we see on a score and what we hear. However, the present situation actually forces bands to break the law, or in some circles it's called cheating. But in actual fact, most bands are just making the best of what they've got. To use non-ABBA adjudicators at contests causes a lack of controlled adjudication, which in turn causes a band to lose the right to protest or appeal, because non-ABBA adjudicators don't need to justify what they've done or said. They're not to be held at task by anyone. However, this is something that ABBA are very keen on. We have a very strict disciplinary procedure regarding any complaint from bandsmen or contest organisers. So, in conclusion, I feel that all the above points actually make fit for purpose an almost impossible task for any contest organiser at this present time.
Thank you, David. Andy, I've got a slightly different question for you. Is UniBrass fit for purpose?
I think that's a very good question. I think what we aim to do more than anything is ensure that there is this level of progression, and I think the guys have talked about it, that the structure in more general contesting, it's all about kind of progressing up to that next level, and kind of I agree wholeheartedly that the first section, having made that jump, is not fit for purpose. But what in UniBrass we want to do is take people from youth section banding and get them continuing playing whilst they're at university, so that they then go on and carry on playing in their adult lives. I know my sister is a clarinet player who didn't necessarily go on, wasn't encouraged to go on, and has now unfortunately stopped playing. So I think from that perspective, and certainly with the levels of growth that we've seen in the number of student brass bands going from 10 about 10 years ago to, we reckon, about 35 now, most of which the bands have doubled in size in that time, it suggests that whatever we're doing appears to be working. There are more people than ever playing. So I think in that regard, yes, there is always the question of standard, and I know that in my own university band we've always struggled with having some players who play at championship level and some players relatively new, and I think that is always going to be a problem, in that getting a band at a right level when you have players who are not at a university for their musical requirements but they're on their academic ability, always going to be difficult. And so we don't necessarily see the progression of bands going up through the two sections that we now have. The other thing that I'd like to make a comment on is just about the financing, and I think it's an interesting point. You say the area prize money is less than the money for the national finals, and it's very good to be able to say that, yes, it's an invitation, it should be free, you should be given support to go, but in reality, we have to consider where that money is going to come from. As James said, at Cheltenham the other week, there's maybe, 40 or 50 people. If we start letting in Bandsman for free, not charging for entry, giving money to coach travel, that's thousands and thousands of pounds, which means that each of you 40, 50 tickets is probably going to have to cost a similar amount, which people just aren't going to pay anyway. And I think what we at UniBrass do is we ask people to contribute. So it's usually less than £5 per player, it's less than the cost of a pint, which it brings in a lot of our revenue. It doesn't cover our costs by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's important that we as contest organisers understand the cost involved, and unfortunately we don't all have sell-out concert halls as Ulf and Martin are lucky to have. And so there does need to be this contribution from players to make sure that these things do carry on, because if they're not supported by bands, both in terms of logistically but also financially, these venues aren't cheap. Adjudicators, to get the good quality adjudicators they need paying for, there's a whole host of other associated costs, even just like things like hiring in high quality percussion that you would rightly expect for performance. These things cost a lot of money, and I think when considering the current structure, that needs to be remembered, that these things aren't free. There isn't, well, the Arts Council is very good at providing money, they don't have an unlimited amount of money. We can't apply for that for contesting, and so that contribution does need to be made.
Yeah. Martin Mortimer, obviously your contests at the Spring Festival and the British Open, very, very popular events with bands and audience. The structure is slightly different there. It's not the national structure that we use with the 5 sections. Obviously something that works for you?
Yes, I mean, what we've done really over the years is that when Karen and I took over the contest fully, when my mum wasn't around anymore, we decided that the Spring Festival was getting quite tired, and really, whilst the venue was very, we were well received there, it needed to move on, so we moved it to Blackpool, which I think was a good move, and we doubled the size of it. Now, that was quite a risk at the time, but it was an experiment, and we then took it to 3 sections. I think that's fine. I think we the combination of that and the feeder contests that we have that are working very well as a structure, and we don't see ourselves in any way sort of being competition with the nationals. We do different things, hopefully with the same type of aims to encourage bands. Our lower sections are, as you know, very much just about relegation and promotion. and trying to enable bands to get up to that next structure, that next contest, and ultimately up to the Open. I think there's many good points to be made on, from our panel members. I think some very astute comments here. I will answer your question. It is related, I think. I think if you look at the thing in the round as an organiser, getting the right venues at the right price that suits the contest that we run is very difficult to do. There are not that many places where you can go, and I think that if you're going to run them, do them properly, and finding that balance where you've got the right venues that are at reasonable price that makes sense. And also, we have to think about hotel accommodation, availability of these things. They're all considerations. So I think that it is a real challenge. I think you're absolutely right about, probably people do not realise all the bits and pieces. I'm sure Ulf does, Martin will as well. What is involved in the costs of running these contests, whether it be adjudicators, halls, all the bits and pieces. It's quite a big challenge. It must be a big challenge for the nationals, as it is for us. We try to ensure, and taking on one of the points about people in the hall, and some comments were made out here, I think what we have to do is to get as many people into the halls in the smaller sections, because there's nothing more demoralising than to be sitting in a hall when you've been rehearsing hard for quite a period of time, and then there's a very limited number of people. That is partially about the choice of the music, because it has to be accessible, it has to be something that people like listening to. That is an important factor. So I haven't really answered the question directly, but there's our thoughts on the sort of dilemma you're asking us about.
Yeah. Well, finally on this point, you're obviously coming from a different angle from across the North Sea. I've no doubt you'll have faced some of the same issues in Norway as you're obviously seeing here.
Let me first just say something I forgot when we had this discussion about closed and open adjudication. I just forgot to mention that the main reason from the jury members to prefer closed adjudication was this distraction point, that they don't want to be distracted by audience, or they can use, when they sit there, body language, even though it will not be misinterpreted by the audience, etc., etc. So that was the main reason, as I remember from the survey we did. So, moving on to the Norwegian, I can say something about that. In the Norwegian Nationals, we have every year in the Grieg Hall, the concert hall that is named after Edvard Grieg, our national composer, in Bergen, second weekend of February. So that is a fixed date, fixed venue, 2 different halls, 6 divisions, 70 plus bands, in all sections playing an own choice piece, apart from the championship section, which has own choice plus set test piece. Open adjudication in all sections, except from the set test piece in the elite section, which still carry the jury box and the curtain. Being president of the European Brass Band Association, I have had the privilege of visiting most of the national contests around Europe. And to go to the European, it is a member country, to decide about the nomination of the band, who is being nominated to take part in the European, and what is the system. So we were actually not invited to have a say when you're in England, decided to stop the English nationals and have the best English band in the nationals in Royal Albert Hall as the nomination for the European. We were fine with that, so there were no issues about it, but it's a national decision to make. The formats around Europe are different. Some countries have one set test piece, that's it. Others have, for instance, Switzerland have on choice and set test piece. Some have open, most have closed adjudication. The common pattern is that the national contests are federation-owned and run by the federation, which is an important point. That is for almost all countries in Europe. So there is a kind of a democracy behind it. So if the bands are disagreeing or have different views on things, there is a kind of a system that they can decide differently by their democratic organizations based on membership and regions, and ultimately you have a national board or a contest committee. So it's federation-owned, most of the countries, indirectly then ruled by the members. It's all sections in one event, 1 day or 2 days, but they gather all sections in one place, and it's all held in a prominent concert hall. I can't remember any contest anymore who do this multifunctional basket sports hall for the nationals. They all are in prominent classical proper symphony or concert halls, and most of the countries also have one registration system, which is the same for all bands. However, in many countries they allow, not only allow, but they see it as a positive thing if, for instance, players in the top bands in like Bergen, Stavanger, Oslo, who used to come from some village band in the fjords or the valleys, if they want to play with a local band still in the nationals, the local fourth section band, that is something positive that we try to facilitate. So this is the system. And then the format for the European is very hard because we go to a new country every year. So my first duty is to make sure that the local organizers are delivering on the same international European level. So if you are coming with your third cornet and are playing again in the European as you did 3 years ago, you should meet the same top standard organizationally. However, there should be a local flavor that is different from being in France and being in Scotland, but the quality and level should be the same. And to combine those two things is, when we do that successfully, that makes the trick for a successful European.
Yeah. Just before we move on, we've had a comment in from Russell Gray, the conductor of the National Champions. Of course, at last we are now talking to each other. Let's keep moving forward with positive ideas and discussion. Wonderful to see. Sorry, I couldn't be there. I mean, but we've all got an idea there about whether it's fit for structure and certain parts may seem to be, but what do we want to do about it? Do we want to actually change anything? Is there an appetite for change within this room? Are we happy with how things are? I've seen Paul Fisher's hand gone up at the back there. If Rosie could get to Paul.
Hi, sorry, me again. I'm just really passionate about why we're all here, you know? We all love our music. We all want to make music, don't we? And I think that we're just too insular. I was recently, like James, at the national finals at Cheltenham and with my band, and I bumped into an old friend of mine from Wales, actually, and he is now a principal conductor, travels around Europe conducting, in fact, he travels around the world conducting orchestras. So, like, he's a proper orchestral conductor. And he was there supporting his brother, who was playing in one of the bands. And I happened to bump into him, and he's, "It's lovely to see you. How are you doing? He said to me, "You know, I've not been to a brass band competition for 25 years. And he said, and absolutely nothing has changed. And he said, and I don't mean in a good way. And I think that is the view of the outside looking in on us. And for me personally, this might be controversial, so apologies if it is. I'm very lucky. The organisation that I run in Amersham, we've got 2 competing bands at the moment. We've got our band that, like James's band, have just qualified for the championship section. And like James, we're going to really struggle to try and play that piece. There's a massive gap between first section and championship. Yeah. But our other band is a 4th section band with lots of children and lots of older people. We run an open door policy. We've got 40 people in that band. They have a great time on a Thursday, and it's all about fun and enjoyment. And then along comes January, and it's the national championships. the regionals, and only 25 people are allowed to play in that competition. So who's the person that has to phone up those 15 people to say, I'm really, really sorry. I know I spend my whole year trying to inspire you and infuse you, but guess what? Brass bands won't let you play in their competition. And to me, that is the worst part of my job. I love brass bands, I'm passionate about it, but when I have to phone children and all their parents up to tell them, unfortunately, such and such isn't allowed to play, you know, when we spend all this time trying to inspire these children, and at the first hurdle, we're telling them, you're not allowed to. I'm really sorry. Now, can you know, you can only have 3 percussionists in a band. I've got grade 6 trumpet players who are 12 and 13 who, they love coming to band practice. And I have to say to them, would you like a pair of drumsticks? You know, I mean, we need to look at ourselves and go, come on, what can we do about this? We need to look out and we need to embrace our community, and maybe let's look at the 4th section, not have a box, you know. If, like Professor Gregson was talking about earlier, you know, I've got a 12-year-old soprano player. He's great. He loves coming to band. But if there's somebody in a box says, unlucky, you know, soprano player, you split that note. If they saw a 12-year-old, you'd go, great, well done, young man, you were fantastic. Better luck next time, but congratulations. That's what we need.
Yeah.
I don't know if...
I mean, we really do. We really do have to kind of finish up, but we'll have one final comment from Mike. Sorry, Hugh, we'll talk in the bar later.
Just because, you know, another thing I do is in terms of judging as well. And when I'm judging anything, I want to feel as though I'm part of the audience too. So it would be great to, exactly as Paul has just said, I'd like to see the circumstances and things around it and all of that kind of thing. So obviously the point was made that this is all down to suspicion. I think that was the word that you used. So if we're really worried about that, I think one of the best ideas we came up with at lunchtime was that, how about if we're all worried about that, let's just put a curtain in front of the band, and then we all experience the same, you know, so the audience and the judges can sit together in blind ignorance and enjoy the performance together, and we can reveal who it was at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And really, that's how stupid it is, isn't it? Because if we can't learn to trust each other, we can't learn to accept what the quality of the judges and the, you know, our contest organisers have got a lot of experience in this, so we've got to list, you know, we've got to make sure that we just trust them, go along, do our best, scrap all these curtains and stuff, you know, because, you know, like I say, the only real solution is just to draw the curtains on the stage and let's just listen in blissful ignorance for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But,
Just before we finish, thanks, Mike. Just before we finish, and just a kind of straightforward poll here, are we all happy with the way things are, or would we like things to change? So votes for keeping everything the same. Okay, and for some change. Yeah, I think we've got a kind of overwhelming view there. Now, how we're going to do that, that is obviously for another day, and sorry we've gone over time a bit, but I'd just like to finish by thanking everybody on the panel here today. Some of them have come a very long way, and I'm sure we appreciate every one of their efforts. Also, for the people online. Yep. Also to the people online who have kept the questions and the points coming in, and obviously yourselves in the audience here. Thank you so much for your attention to this. The world can take this away and debate it. We've maybe opened up a few cans of worms. Maybe there's still quite a few to be opened. But thanks.